guys, it's Christine and I'm a little late, but I'm here with an October wrap-up and a preview of what I have been and will be reading in November. So the first book I read in October is The Mirage by Matt Ruff, and I really liked this book. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It was a little slow at the beginning because I was getting used to the alternate universe or alternate history of the novel, but I ended up really liking it, and I think I read the second half of this book in like pretty much one sitting, so I highly recommend this one. The next book I read in October is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I think that's how you say his name, I don't know. And as always, I really liked this. This is the second time that I've read this book and I loved it as usual. I definitely recommend it if this sounds interesting to you. If it doesn't sound interesting, don't read it because it's way too much work. But I rated this 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. I read this for the first time in high school and I really appreciated it more having read it 6 years later now that I'm done with college and I'm a little more knowledgeable about things. There's a lot of foreign language stuff that I didn't understand when I was in high school, and now I've taken more language classes and so I knew what some of the stuff meant, which was cool, and I just made a lot more connections that I couldn't have made 6 years ago. The third book that I read in October is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, and I loved this book. I'm pretty sure I gave it 5 out of 5 on Goodreads, but I just loved it. Everything tied together so well, and the whole story within a story was really great. And this was one of 3 books that I read in the last few weeks that has twins in it, so apparently I was in a very twinny mood this month. The fourth book I read in November I've already done a review on, and that is Night Film by Marisha Pessl, and I ended up really liking this. Halfway through I was just like, I am not such a big fan, but it wrapped up so well that it kind of made all of the stuff that I didn't really care for totally worth it for me. I'll put a link to my review down below. It's kind of long and there's a spoiler alert in there, but if you've read this book, definitely check it out and we can talk about this book because there is a lot to talk about with this book. And after I got Night Film, I ended up getting a Kindle, and so the next few books I read in the end of October were all in a week, and they were all on my Kindle, and the first of those books was Catching Fire. I reread Catching Fire because the movie's coming out soon, and it was the only full-length book that I had ready to go for my Kindle, and I have since bought more of them. And I really like this. This isn't necessarily my favorite, though I do really like it. I like what it builds to, but it was really cool to read it on my Kindle. I had read it before on my Kindle for Mac app, and this is such a fast, fun read that it's perfect for reading on an e-reader. The next book that I read on my Kindle is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, and I really love this book. I read the Kindle preview of it and immediately bought the whole book. I didn't even care that it was like $9 or whatever, because it was just so cute, and I was just like, this sounds like everyone on Tumblr, and these are my people. And I love this book. There were so many times I was reading through and I was just like squealing with joy because something was just so adorable. But there were also a lot of parts that were really relatable about like how lonely being an internet person can be, and being really shy and awkward and trying to fit in during a new phase of your life. For Kath, it's going to college, and I can really relate to that. That's how I felt when I started college, and not quite to this extent, but I could definitely relate, and so it was probably the most relatable book I have ever read. And those were all the books I read in October proper, but I've also read another 2 books and started a third in the time between October 31st and today, November 5th. Over the weekend I read Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn? And I really enjoyed this book. This book was perfect for just like curling up in a chair and having just one more chapter. Okay, one more chapter. Okay, one more for the whole weekend. Every time that I decided I was going to put this down, I didn't, and it was so good. I highly recommend it. It was really dark, really twisted, another really great read for fall. I like reading things that are kind of dark and creepy during fall, if you can't tell. And the last book that I finished in the October, early November period is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I finished this yesterday, and unfortunately I was not really a fan of this book. I didn't particularly care for Death as a narrator because he was so distant and detached in his narration that I just did not care about any of the characters really. And he hints at the ending over and over, so I wasn't even surprised about the end, and so I wasn't really that emotional about it. I also have to say that I took a World War I and World War II class in the spring semester of my senior year, so like 6 months ago. So I'm still really burned out on stuff about Nazis. And it seemed to plod along. There wasn't a whole lot of action, and normally I don't mind when there's not a whole lot of action, but I was waiting for something to happen like the whole time, and nothing did. So I wish that I would have liked The Book Thief, but I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads because it was just okay for me. I think if I had read this many years ago, I would have been a really big fan of it, but having gotten kind of burned out on World War II literature, or literature based during World War II, it just wasn't really for me. The last 2 books I have to show you I will definitely be reading in November. A couple weeks ago I bought at a bookstore, imagine that, I bought The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich, and I'm really excited for this. I read a sample of this about a year ago on my Kindle app, and so I waited and waited for this to come out in paperback, and it did a few weeks ago, and I really like this cover. This cover is really nice, very symbolic for the plot. This is about a young boy named Joe who in 1988 his mother was brutally attacked just outside of or barely within the borders of their Indian reservation. And not only is this a really interesting plot and it's definitely keeping me hooked, but I'm also looking forward to learning a lot about laws within and pertaining to Indian culture, Native American culture. I think this is going to be not only just very fun to read and very gripping, but also really educational, which is awesome. And the other book that I'm definitely going to be reading in November is Our Tragic Universe by Scarlett Thomas. I know I've been talking about this book a lot, and I ordered this like a few months ago. I read the Kindle preview the other day when I was at work, and I was like, well, I definitely have to read this now. I actually stopped reading the preview because I knew if I kept reading it, I would go home and immediately start it, and I was in the middle of like 2 or 3 other books at the time. But I'm really excited to get to this one, and enough time has passed between when I read The End of Mr. Y and when I'm going to be reading this in the next couple weeks that I don't think that my reading of this is going to be really influenced by Scarlett Thomas's other book. And so that was most of the reason that I've had this on my shelf for so long, is I didn't want to go from one book to another and just compare them. So those are all the books I read in October and the books that I've been reading and will be reading in November. Obviously there are going to be many other books, but I'm really close to my 2013 goal of 60 books for the year. I think I'm at 57 right now, so I am really excited to get to that goal. I'm definitely going to be surpassing it because it's not even December yet. So if you've read any of these books, definitely comment down below, tell me what you think of them, and we can chat in the comments. And that is all I have for you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll speak to you guys again soon. Bye!